There are moments in television when entertainment becomes something far more profound, moments when the cameras capture not just a game, but a revelation of character that changes lives forever. On a warm September afternoon in 2024, Family Feud was taping what the production crew expected to be a routine episode. The studio was filled with the usual energy and excitement. Two families stood ready to compete for prize money. Steve Harvey prepared to deliver his signature blend of humor and heart. Nobody in that studio could have predicted that within 15 minutes, one contestant would walk off the stage in shame, his carefully constructed facade shattered by a single moment of truth. What Steve Harvey uncovered that day would prove that sometimes the most important victories have nothing to do with winning games. Before we dive into this remarkable story, if you appreciate moments of genuine truth and accountability on television, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. What happens next demonstrates why Robert Mitchell was 47 years old and appeared to have everything figured out. He lived in an upscale suburb of Chicago with his wife Jennifer and their two teenage daughters. He drove a luxury sedan, wore expensive suits, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who had achieved success. To his neighbors, to his colleagues, and even to much of his extended family, Robert was the picture of the American dream realized. He worked as a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company, a position that came with an impressive title and what everyone assumed was an equally impressive salary. Robert's family had been selected to appear on Family Feud after his wife Jennifer submitted their application 6 months earlier. She thought it would be a fun experience for the family, something they could look back on together. Their daughters, 15-year-old Emma and 17-year-old Sarah, were excited about the prospect of being on television. Robert's younger brother Thomas and his wife completed their 5-person team. What Jennifer did not know, what their daughters did not know, and what Thomas had only recently begun to suspect, was that Robert's success was largely an illusion. For the past 3 years, Robert had been living a double life built on deception and desperation. The luxury sedan was leased at terms he could barely afford. The expensive suits were purchased on credit cards that were nearly maxed out. The impressive title at work masked the reality that Robert's sales performance had been declining for 2 years, and his actual income was a fraction of what his lifestyle suggested. Robert had grown up as the older of 2 brothers in a working-class family in Gary, Indiana. His father had worked in the steel mills for 30 years before the plant closed. His mother had been a secretary at a local elementary school. They had provided a stable, loving home, but money was always tight. Robert remembered wearing hand-me-down clothes and watching his parents stress over bills. He remembered the look of defeat in his father's eyes when the mill closed and the family had to move to a smaller apartment. From a young age, Robert had made a promise to himself that he would be different. He would be successful. He would provide his family with the kind of life his parents had never been able to give him. He would never experience the shame of not being able to afford what his children needed. This determination drove him through college, where he worked 2 jobs to avoid taking on debt. It pushed him through his early career as he climbed the corporate ladder with impressive speed. For the first 10 years of his marriage, Robert had indeed provided well for his family. He and Jennifer had saved diligently. They had purchased a modest home in a good school district. They had managed their money carefully and built a solid foundation. But somewhere along the way, Robert's drive to provide had transformed into an obsession with appearance. Success was no longer about stability and security. It became about perception and status. The shift had been gradual. It started with small purchases designed to project an image of greater success than he had actually achieved. A watch that cost more than he should have spent. A car upgrade that stretched their budget. Robert told himself these investments were necessary for his career, that appearing successful was part of being successful in sales. Jennifer had questioned some of the purchases, but Robert had assured her that his career was advancing and that they could afford it. Then, 3 years ago, Robert's company had undergone a restructuring. His sales territory was reduced, and his commission structure changed in ways that significantly decreased his income. Robert's actual earnings dropped by nearly 40%, almost overnight. But he told no one, not Jennifer, not his brother, not his parents, who by then were elderly and proud of what they believed was their son's great success. Robert could not bear to admit that he was struggling. He could not face the idea that he might appear to be failing. Instead of adjusting his lifestyle to match his reduced income, Robert doubled down on maintaining the illusion. He started using credit cards to cover the gap between his income and expenses. When those cards reached their limits, he opened new ones. When even that was not enough, he began taking cash advances. He refinanced their house to pay off some of the credit card debt, but instead of changing his spending habits, he simply used the newly available credit to continue his charade. Robert became an expert at hiding the truth. He intercepted mail before Jennifer could see the credit card statements. He created a separate email account for financial correspondence. He made excuses for why he needed to handle certain bills personally. He became skilled at deflection and misdirection, always having an answer ready when Jennifer asked questions about their finances. The deception required constant vigilance and created tremendous stress, but Robert could not see another way forward. Admitting the truth felt impossible. By the time Jennifer submitted their application to Family Feud, Robert was more than $150,000 in debt that Jennifer knew nothing about. The house that appeared to be their security was mortgaged far beyond its value. The retirement accounts that were supposed to be growing were nearly depleted. Robert's financial house of cards was weeks away from collapse, but he maintained the facade with desperate determination. When Jennifer told Robert that they had been selected to appear on Family Feud, his first reaction was panic. The idea of being on national television while living such a profound lie terrified him. But Jennifer and the girls were so excited that he could not bring himself to object without raising questions he was not prepared to answer. So Robert agreed to participate, telling himself that he could manage one more performance, one more day of pretending everything was fine. The Chen family arrived at the Family Feud studio on a bright Tuesday morning. Jennifer had coordinated their outfits, choosing burgundy shirts and dark jeans for everyone. The girls were thrilled, taking selfies backstage and giggling with excitement. Thomas and his wife were relaxed and cheerful, treating the experience as a fun family adventure. Robert smiled and joked with everyone, but inside he felt a growing sense of dread that he could not quite explain. Their opponents were the Patterson family from Atlanta, a warm and energetic group who brought infectious enthusiasm to the stage. Steve Harvey opened the show with his trademark humor, and the games began. The first question was straightforward, asking families to name something people do to relax after work. Robert buzzed in first and answered confidently, "Watch television," he said. The answer was on the board at number 2. The Mitchell family took control of the question and played. Jennifer gave a solid answer. Emma contributed well. They won the round easily, and Robert felt some of his tension ease. Perhaps this would be simple after all. Perhaps he could get through this day without incident and return to the careful management of his crumbling facade. The second round proved more challenging. The question asked families to name something people spend too much money on. Robert felt his stomach tighten as Steve Harvey read the question. Thomas buzzed in first this time and answered, "Clothes," which was on the board. The family played, and the answers came quickly. Eating out, entertainment, cars. Then it was Robert's turn. Keeping up appearances, Robert said, and immediately regretted his choice of words. The answer was not on the board. Steve Harvey looked at him with curiosity. Keeping up appearances? That's specific. You got experience with that? Steve asked with a smile, expecting a humorous response. Robert forced a laugh. "Just an observation," he said quickly. The Patterson family eventually stole the round. During the third round, something in Steve Harvey's demeanor shifted. The production crew had been dealing with a technical issue during the commercial break, and someone had approached Steve with information. When they returned to taping, Steve seemed more attentive to Robert specifically, watching him with an expression that suggested more than casual interest. The question for the third round asked families to name a reason someone might hide mail from their spouse. Robert felt the blood drain from his face. Jennifer looked at him and smiled, completely unaware of how close to home this question hit. Thomas buzzed in and answered, "Surprise gift," which was the number one answer. The family played, and various answers filled the board: hiding bills, bad news, secret purchases. Each answer felt like an accusation to Robert. When it was Robert's turn, he hesitated visibly. Steve noticed immediately. "Robert, you thinking awful hard about why someone would hide mail from their spouse," Steve observed. "You got something you want to share with the class." The audience laughed, but there was an edge to Steve's tone that had not been there before. "Just trying to think of what's on the board," Robert said, his voice tight. He gave an answer that was not up there, and the family lost the round. As they reset for the next question, Steve Harvey did something unusual. He walked over to Robert's position and spoke to him directly, off microphone, while the crew adjusted equipment. Whatever Steve said was brief, but Robert's face transformed. The color that had drained away earlier now returned in a deep flush. His hands, which had been clenched at his sides, began to tremble slightly. When Steve walked back to his position and the game resumed, something fundamental had changed in the dynamic on stage. The Mitchell family managed to win the main game despite Robert's increasingly distracted performance. They had earned the right to play Fast Money for $20,000. During the commercial break before Fast Money began, Robert pulled Jennifer aside. The cameras were not recording, but several crew members were within earshot. "We need to leave," Robert said urgently. "Right now. We need to go." Jennifer looked at him in confusion. "What are you talking about? We just won. We get to play for $20,000. Robert shook his head, his agitation growing. "I don't care about the money. We need to leave this studio immediately." Thomas had approached in time to hear the exchange. "Rob, what's going on? You've been acting strange since we got here." Robert turned to his brother with an expression somewhere between anger and desperation. "Stay out of this, Thomas. This doesn't concern you." But Thomas did not back down. "You're my brother, and something is clearly wrong. Talk to us." Before Robert could respond, Steve Harvey walked over to the family. His expression was serious, and his usual humor had been replaced by something more grave. "Robert, we need to have a conversation. Right now. Your family deserves to know the truth about what's happening." Jennifer looked between her husband and Steve Harvey, her confusion deepening into concern. "Truth about what? Steve, what's going on?" Steve looked at Robert, giving him an opportunity to speak. When Robert remained silent, Steve turned to Jennifer with evident reluctance. "Mrs. Mitchell, during the break, I received some information from our production team. When families apply to be on our show, we do basic background checks. Nothing invasive, just standard verification. What we found regarding your husband requires us to address it before we can continue." Jennifer's face had gone pale. "I don't understand. What did you find?" Steve looked at Robert again. "Do you want to tell her, or do I need to?" Robert stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. His carefully constructed world was collapsing around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Steve turned back to Jennifer, his voice gentle but firm. "Your husband has been living under a false identity for the past 3 years. The name Robert Mitchell, the social security number he's been using, the employment history he's claimed. None of it matches his actual documentation. The real Robert Mitchell is a man who lives in Oregon and has no connection to your family. Your husband has been using his identity." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Jennifer took a step backward, her hand going to her mouth. Thomas looked at his brother with an expression of complete shock. The daughters, who had been called over by a crew member, stood frozen in horror. Robert finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "It's not what you think." Steve Harvey shook his head. "Then explain it to us. Explain to your wife and your children why you've been living under someone else's name. Explain why your employment records don't match reality. Explain why, when we tried to verify your information for standard tax purposes, everything came back as fraudulent." Robert looked at Jennifer, at his daughters, at his brother. He saw the betrayal in their eyes, the confusion and hurt. Everything he had been trying to protect them from, the shame, the failure, the inadequacy, was now visible in the worst possible way. He had wanted to shield them from the reality of his struggles, and instead he had done something far worse. "I lost my job 3 years ago," Robert said finally, the words tumbling out. "The company downsized, and I was let go. I couldn't find another position that paid anywhere near what I had been making. We were already overextended financially. I panicked. I met someone who offered me a way to create a new employment history, a new credit profile. They sold me someone else's identity. I thought it would just be temporary, just until I got back on my feet. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out." Jennifer's voice was barely audible. "You've been living as someone else for 3 years. Everything about your job, our house, our life, it's all based on fraud." Robert tried to reach for her, but she pulled away. "I did it for you. For the girls. I couldn't bear to lose everything. I couldn't face everyone knowing I had failed." Steve Harvey's voice cut through the moment with unexpected force. "No, sir. You did not do this for your family. You did this for yourself. You did this because you cared more about appearance than truth. You put your entire family at risk of criminal prosecution. You used someone else's identity, which means someone else out there has had their credit destroyed, their life disrupted, all so you could maintain a lie." The full weight of what Robert had done settled over everyone present. Thomas spoke, his voice shaking with anger. "My brother died 7 years ago." "Robert isn't even your real name, is it?" Robert shook his head slowly. "It's Marcus. Marcus Webb. I took the identity of Robert Mitchell because he had good credit and no criminal record. I thought nobody would ever find out." Steve looked at the production crew, then back at the family. "Marcus, Jennifer, whatever happens next is up to your family and the authorities. But you cannot play for that money today. You cannot continue to benefit from fraud on this stage. We're going to stop taping, and we're going to make sure the appropriate people are contacted to sort this out." Marcus looked at Jennifer one more time. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to give you the life you deserved." Jennifer's response was quiet but devastating. "The life I deserved was an honest one. I would have worked 3 jobs if needed. I would have moved to a smaller house. I would have done whatever it took as long as we were doing it honestly, together. But you decided I didn't get to make that choice. You decided our entire life would be built on a lie." Marcus turned and walked off the stage. He walked past the crew, past the cameras, past the audience who sat in stunned silence. He walked out of the studio and into the parking lot, where security stopped him. Within an hour, the police arrived. Within 2 hours, Marcus Webb was arrested for identity theft, fraud, and numerous related charges. The episode was never aired. Instead, Family Feud released a statement explaining that an episode had been interrupted due to the discovery of fraudulent activity by a contestant. They did not release names or details, citing ongoing legal proceedings. However, the story began to circulate through various channels. People who had been in the studio audience shared what they had witnessed. Local news in Chicago picked up the story when Marcus Webb's arrest became public record. Jennifer Mitchell, who legally was Jennifer Webb though she had not known it, filed for divorce within a week of the incident. She also faced a lengthy legal process of untangling her life from her husband's crimes. She had known nothing about the identity theft, and investigators confirmed she was not complicit in his fraud. However, the house they lived in was purchased under false pretenses. The cars, the credit cards, nearly everything in their life had to be examined and addressed. The financial devastation was comprehensive. Jennifer and her daughters had to move from their suburban home into a modest apartment. The cars were repossessed. Jennifer had to find a job immediately, taking a position as an administrative assistant that paid far less than what she had assumed Marcus was earning, but which provided honest income. Her daughters had to transfer to a new school district. The life they had known disappeared almost overnight, but something unexpected happened as the family began to rebuild. The community rallied around Jennifer and her daughters in ways they never anticipated. Her church provided financial assistance during the transition. Neighbors who learned of the situation donated furniture and household items. Local businesses offered Emma and Sarah part-time jobs that would help them save for college. People who had previously been just acquaintances became genuine sources of support. Jennifer discovered that she was stronger than she had ever known. The fear of financial struggle, that Marcus had used to justify his crimes turned out to be far less terrible than living with lies. Jennifer worked hard, managed money carefully, and slowly rebuilt a life based on truth. Her daughters, while hurt by their father's deception, found resilience they did not know they possessed. Marcus Webb was convicted of identity theft and fraud. He served 18 months in prison and was ordered to pay significant restitution to the real Robert Mitchell, whose life had been severely disrupted by having his identity stolen. During his time in prison, Marcus was required to attend counseling that helped him understand how his obsession with appearances and his fear of failure had driven him to make increasingly destructive choices. When Marcus was released, he reached out to Jennifer, hoping for reconciliation. She declined to see him but agreed to communicate through letters. In her first letter, she wrote something that Marcus would carry with him forever. "You were so afraid of failing that you guaranteed our failure. You were so afraid of shame that you created genuine shame. You were so concerned with what others thought that you destroyed what actually mattered. I hope someday you understand that success is not about what you appear to be. It is about who you actually are." Steve Harvey was deeply affected by what happened during that taping. In subsequent interviews, he spoke about the incident without using names or identifying details. He talked about how it had reminded him that television shows touch real lives, and that sometimes entertainment intersects with profound human struggles in unexpected ways. He emphasized that the greatest tragedy was not the exposure of the fraud, but the original decision to value appearance over truth. The real Robert Mitchell from Oregon, whose identity had been stolen, eventually connected with Jennifer and her daughters. He expressed sympathy for what they had endured and confirmed that Marcus Webb's crimes had indeed disrupted his life significantly. Credit accounts opened in his name had to be disputed. His credit score had been damaged. He had spent countless hours working with authorities to prove that transactions and activities attributed to him were actually committed by someone else. However, Robert Mitchell also showed remarkable grace. He did not harbor anger toward Jennifer or her daughters. He recognized that they were victims as much as he was. When Jennifer struggled with the restitution payments that Marcus was required to make but could not afford from prison, Robert Mitchell worked with authorities to reduce the financial burden on the family. He said that destroying their lives further would not restore what had been taken from him. The story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing image over substance, about the cascading consequences of deception, and about the impossible weight of maintaining lies. Financial counselors used the case as an example of how financial shame can drive people to make choices that transform manageable problems into catastrophic ones. Marriage therapists discussed how the lack of honest communication between partners can allow serious issues to grow until they become unsolvable. 5 years after the incident, Jennifer had rebuilt her life completely. She had advanced in her career and was earning a decent living. Her daughters had both graduated high school and were attending college on scholarships they had earned through their own hard work. Emma had written her college application essay about resilience and learning to value authenticity over appearance. Sarah had become an advocate for financial literacy education, speaking at high schools about the importance of understanding money management and the dangers of living beyond one's means. Jennifer had also become involved in supporting other women whose lives had been upended by their partner's financial deception. She volunteered with an organization that helped families navigate the aftermath of fraud and identity theft. She spoke openly about her experience, helping others understand that they were not alone and that recovery was possible. Marcus Webb, after his release from prison, worked in construction and lived in a modest efficiency apartment. He paid what he could toward his restitution obligations. He attended regular therapy and participated in a support group for people struggling with issues of shame and image. He sent his daughters letters that they sometimes read and sometimes did not. He lived with the knowledge that his fear of appearing unsuccessful had cost him his family, his freedom, and years of his life. In one of his letters to Emma, written on her 20th birthday, Marcus wrote something that showed he had finally begun to understand what he had lost. "Your mother tried to teach me that love was about showing up honestly, not showing off successfully. I did not listen. I thought I was protecting you from struggle, but I was really protecting myself from the truth about who I was. Real strength is facing hard things with honesty. Real success is building a life on truth, even when that life is humble. I hope you never make the mistakes I made. I hope you never confuse image with substance. I hope you always remember that the people who love you want your authentic presence, not your impressive performance. The Family Feud production team implemented additional verification procedures following the incident. They strengthened their background check processes and created protocols for addressing situations when concerning information came to light. Steve Harvey personally reviewed these new policies, wanting to ensure that the show could continue to be a positive platform for families while also protecting participants and the show from fraud. The incident also sparked broader conversations about identity theft prevention and the pressure people feel to maintain certain lifestyles regardless of their actual financial reality. Consumer protection agencies reported increased inquiries about credit monitoring and identity theft protection. Financial advisors noted more clients coming forward to discuss debt problems before they became unmanageable. The shame that had driven Marcus Webb to commit fraud became a focal point for discussions about how societal pressures around success and appearance can lead people to make destructive choices. Television critics and media scholars analyzed how the incident had unfolded on what was supposed to be a lighthearted game show. They discussed the ethical obligations of television producers when they discover that participants are involved in illegal activity. They debated whether the show had handled the situation appropriately and whether there was a better way to protect innocent family members who knew nothing about the fraud. Most concluded that, in the circumstances, stopping the taping and involving authorities was the responsible course of action, even though it was painful for everyone involved. The story also highlighted an uncomfortable truth about modern life and the pressure to project success. In an age of social media and constant comparison, many people struggle with the gap between the life they live and the life they believe they should be presenting to the world. Marcus Webb's extreme response was criminal, but the underlying anxiety about appearing successful was something many people understood on some level. The incident prompted discussions about authentic living, about being honest regarding struggles, and about the difference between healthy ambition and destructive obsession with image. 10 years after the incident, Jennifer agreed to be interviewed for a documentary about fraud and its impact on families. In that interview, she reflected on everything that had happened and everything she had learned. She spoke about the initial shock and betrayal, the difficult process of rebuilding, and the unexpected gifts that had come from having to reconstruct her life on a foundation of truth. "I was angry for a long time," Jennifer said in the interview. "Angry at Marcus for what he had done. Angry at myself for not seeing the signs. Angry at the situation. But eventually I realized that anger was just keeping me trapped in the past. What Marcus did was wrong. The consequences for our family were severe. But in losing everything we thought we had, we discovered what actually mattered. We discovered our own strength. We discovered genuine community. We discovered that a small, honest life is infinitely more valuable than a large, false one." Jennifer continued with words that would become widely quoted. "People think the hardest thing is losing what you have. But the hardest thing is realizing you never really had it in the first place. Everything we thought was ours was built on lies. Starting over with nothing was painful, but it was also liberating. We knew that everything we built from that point forward was real. There is tremendous peace in that." The interviewer asked Jennifer if she had any message for people who might be in situations similar to what Marcus had faced before his crimes. People struggling financially, but hiding that struggle from their families. Jennifer's response was direct. "Tell the truth. Tell it today. Tell it now. Whatever you are hiding, whatever you think will destroy your family if it comes out, bring it out yourself on your terms. Yes, there will be consequences. Yes, it will be hard. But I promise you that the temporary pain of truth is nothing compared to the permanent destruction of deception. My husband thought he was protecting us, but he was actually ensuring our destruction. Do not make that mistake. The people who love you deserve the truth, and they are stronger than you think. If this story has resonated with you, if you understand the importance of living authentically and prioritizing truth over appearance, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because Marcus Webb's story, as tragic as it is, carries a message that could save families from similar devastation. The message is simple but profound. The courage to be honest about your struggles is worth more than any false success could ever be. Building a life on truth may be harder, but it is the only foundation that will last. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for those we care about is to trust them with the truth, even when that truth is difficult. Reality, no matter how humble, is always better than illusion, no matter how impressive.